Hey, how's it going everyone? Today we'll be covering two Python data types, integers and floats. Both of these data types fall under the number or numeric category, and the reason I bring that up is because there's a third data type under this category, and that's imaginary numbers. I won't be covering that in this video, but I just want you to be aware. So let's get started with integers. First, let's define what an integer is. An integer is a positive or negative whole number, so no decimals at all. Even if it's 3.00 or 4.00, those are considered floats, just for the fact that there's decimal in there. And speaking about zero, even though it's not positive or negative, it's still considered an integer. But if it's 0.00, it is not considered an integer. All right, so let's get coding in Python. So in Python, the integer is considered int, or the int class. If you type int, you can see how the lettering changes color, and if you hover over it, you get more information about that class. So let's write up some simple integers here. Let's assign variables like integer 1 and come up with a whole number, integer 2, any other whole number. We'll make it easy. And then the last one, let's make it a big one, 100. So all three of these here are integers. Notice there's no decimals, so there's anything like that. And actually, before I do that, let me make this a negative number. And what you can do in Python to figure out the data types, if you're not sure of what's actually happening, you can use the type method. And for the argument, you can put the integer or the variable and print it out, which I should have done first, to be honest. There we go. Let's go all the way to the end here. So what I'm doing here, first we're just going to see what kind of data type this is. So I put integer 1, the variable integer 1, which equals 44. So I did type integer 1. So it's going to return the type of this variable and then print it out in the console. So let's go down here, Python app.py. You'll see class int, and that's for integer. Let's check the second one here. We should get the same answer. Class int. And for the third one, the negative number, we should get the same exact thing. Class int. So all three of these were of the class integer. And actually, you know what? I want to try something now. Let's try 0. See what happens there. Apologies for that. Again, it's an integer. Simple as that. And that's all it is. You can add these as well. You should get an integer. So integer 1 plus integer 3, again, integer. The only operator that you should worry about is the division operator, because for that one, although you put an integer over an integer, sometimes you can get a float, which we'll cover in a little bit here. Okay, so let's do 55 or 44. I'll make it easy just by putting the integers in there. And let's see what comes out. Let me clear this out for you. So it's 1.25. So although both the inputs were of the type integer, when you do division, so obviously you don't get a whole number. And at first, when I started playing with division or the arithmetic, I thought it would cut out 0.25, but it doesn't. It keeps it in there instead of making it 1. So if you want to do something like that, you have to floor it, where you do floor division. And when you do that, you get 1, but it's actually still float. So let's do this. Let's do both of them. Awesome. So see here, class integer. So that's for the first line there. That's exactly what we wanted. And then what do we get out of there? We get 1, which is exactly what an integer is. No decimals. It's a whole number. And even if this was negative, we can even do that. Negative. And let's see what we get. Okay, so let's move over to floats. So before we start, what is a float? A float, unlike an integer, is a number with decimals. So 1.1, 1.25, 5.6, they're all float data types. And even if they're negative, they're also considered float data types. So let's change our numbers here. We're going to use the same exact structure, but we're going to put decimal numbers in there. Let's try this. Float 1, 55.5. Next number, some decimal. And then the third number, we'll do a negative decimal number. Awesome. Let's get rid of these here. So first what we're going to do, let's print out their types and see what the console says. Let's do print type, and let's do float 1. And we'll do all three floats so you can see what the console says for us. The first one, it's a float as expected. The second one, same thing, 2 for 2. And let's take a look at the third one. Float. So the big difference between integers and floats is just having the decimal number. And actually, let's try something out. just to really drive this in. Let's do 0.00. It's a float, just like I said earlier. So 0, integer, 0.00 is a float. And it's really that simple. The arithmetic is easier than the integers. So it doesn't matter if you add, subtract, multiply, or divide, you're still going to get a float out of that. And just to make sure, we can try that out. Float 1 divided by float 3. Look at that, it's a float. But what about floor division? Let's see what happens. Interesting, you get a float. Let's take a look what number that actually printed out. So let's do float 1 divided by float 3. Clear this out for you. So you get 1.25, although we floored that. So for the basic arithmetic, you're fine. But for floor division, keep an eye out for that. Yeah, and that's it. That's the data types for integers and floats. It's simple as that. See you next time.